So this takes place this past Halloween when it was my first semester in college. I'm a freshman female. It was Halloween, and while my amazing roommate was getting drunk and partying with my ex-friends for the 100th time, so I was alone and bored in my dorm room. Granted, I didn't want to risk the chance of getting sick, but I also couldn't stand being in that room any longer. Screw it, I wanted to party. So I started looking around on my phone. I forgot how exactly I came across her, but a girl who was a self-proclaimed freshman invited a group of 10 people to this party that her friends were throwing. Social distance and everything she had promised us. Luckily, a couple of my friends wanted to jump on this party, granted that we be careful. So the girls sent us the address and told us to tell the people that Monica had invited us. Well, that's where things got weird. One of my ex-friends decided, hey, screw it. Let's not wait any longer for us to get ready, and granted I was still putting on my makeup, and he went to the party himself. When he got there, he did exactly as this Monica had said, and the guy there refused to let him in. Granted, this ex-friend was a little weird, so we thought, hey, what the heck, we'll just leave if we sense that something is off. After driving there in my friend's, Steve's car, my friend and I, Mary, got out of the back seats and were instantly dumbfounded. Like we weren't expecting a castle or anything. But this place was a literal dump, and the neighborhood was extremely dirty and dark. Well, even though we got the creeps from this place, we did just spend 30 minutes getting there, so whatever. We walked to the door, and this guy who was absolutely plastered and at least on 3 different drugs answers. We tell him that we're Monica's friends. Confused, he looks at Mary and I and just silently nods and opens the door for us to come in, ignoring Steve completely. Well, what met us was certainly not what we had expected. There were around 20 frat guys huddled around a table filled with booze and drugs, silently watching a girl there, giving a guy a lap dance. No masks or anything. We were the only ones that were wearing them. Confused and horrified, we silently head down a huge black staircase that was smack dab in the middle of the cramped living room. What greeted us was not another group of people or Monica and her friends that supposedly had invited us there. Instead, I kid you not, at least 8 black locked doors or more that looked like they came out of a Saw movie greeted us. After trying one of the doors, Steve looked down in horror as the adjacent door slowly opened. What looked like 2 at least middle-aged, greasy men came crawling out, looking at Mary and I in a weirdly perverted way. Unlocking and entering one of the numerous doors, we could only watch in horror as another bouncer-looking man came out of nowhere and started screaming at Steve. Who the heck invited you guys here? Monica, we all reply, really confused. The dude, just looking bemused, goes, who the heck is Monica? We take that as our cue to leave, and we hardly run up fast enough before the bouncer starts to shove and tries to tackle Steve towards the ground. And leaving that house confused as heck, we finally see Monica and 2 other scandalously clothed girls, literally looking as white as a sheet. She gives a small, awkward giggle and a wave, and we floor it the heck out of there, never looking back. Yeah, don't go to random parties in large cities that you're unfamiliar with. The weird part, or really not so weird part, was that Monica was trying to get me to come alone, knowing that I was a girl. In all honesty, I think the people at the party and Monica really only had a problem with Steve, and totally did not expect Mary to bring her boyfriend, or for me to come with friends. Afterwards, Steve told us that he believed it was either a drug house or something much worse, and they had tried luring Mary and I in. So, I used to work as a personal trainer at a very familiar gym in my city to help pay for college. The neighbor of this gym was located as 2 other gyms across these streets, so we would have a lot of clients changing from place to place. I worked the night shift since I was out of class at about 6 p.m. and worked from 6:30 to 10:30. Usually, a lot of guys would go for experimental classes at night, and I was known for working with the bodybuilders. At around 9 p.m., this huge dude with a very arrogant posture walked in for experimental classes. The secretary immediately sent him to me, and I was more than happy to help him out. Although I was pretty sure he already worked out and needed no help whatsoever. Weird, but okay. Throughout the entire hour, this guy would ask me very personal questions. Where do you live? Are you single? What's your shoe size? And as I was working, I just politely tried to keep our conversation focused on training and exercises and that type of stuff. When the class was over, he looked at me and said, "Can I have your number?" "I'm sorry, but I have a fiance." It was true. "Are you sure? I don't usually take no as an answer." "Yeah, I am here just to help you exercise properly. Nothing else." Then this guy puts his finger at my face and goes, "When I get my gun, you won't say no to me." And he walked out of the door. For almost a month, I needed to ask a male coworker to go with me to the parking lot after my late night shift, because this guy would be at the corner waiting for me to get out. He would stare at me and smile and wait for me to leave. Later, I found out that he was at the gym across these streets and took my car as the license plate. I had to ask one of my clients that was a cop to scare him out. Until this day, I can't get his smiling face out of my head. My mom's dog, Punky, R.I.P., was a very sweet, loving dog. She was an ESA dog but trained to be a service dog for PTSD before she had lost her leg. I had never seen her ever get aggressive with anyone in the entire 12 years that she lived. She never growled or nipped at anyone, and she had no sense of smell, so she loved all animals and people. A real gentle giant among our little terriers at 60 pounds. What I'm getting at here was that her barking at something and being aggressive was so wildly uncharacteristic that I only saw it once. I, an 11-year-old female, was at home with my siblings, a 2-year-old male and a 6-year-old female. My then stepdad was at work and my mom had ran up to the gas station to grab a pack of cigarettes. It was only about a mile or two away from us. For reference, we lived in a 2-bedroom trailer in the middle of the woods, on a dead-end road at the time, and you had to really make an effort to get down our road, find our house, navigate down our rickety driveway, and find the door. I'm sitting at the computer having a grand time watching YouTube, when all of a sudden all of our dogs, about 2 Boston Terriers and 1 Chihuahua, perk up. They bark a few times, and start investigating down the hallway. My siblings were napping in the bedroom at the end of the hall at the time, so I figured they just stirred and had scared the dogs. But then Punky sits up suddenly, stands up on the couch and puffs out her chest. Her ears are perked up and her fur was standing on end, her tail straight up, and then she barks. Loudly. I mean, the bark booms through the living room and echoes around, and all of a sudden she lunges off the couch and goes tearing down the hallway. I'm already on edge because I don't think that I've ever heard her bark. She's a Benzinji mix, so her bark is more of a baying sound, but this was a big, loud, alert bark. I stand up and go to look down the hallway, ready to fight off what I'm assuming is a shadow monster in the hallway, based on how the dogs are acting. But then I hear it. A knocking. We didn't get visitors because of how weird our house was location-wise, so my 11-year-old mind had no clue what to do here. The only people who showed up were family and they didn't knock, so I slowly walked towards the door. The knock drew the attention of the dogs and they came running back down the hallway, all except for Punky, and I felt better with our 3 yappy dogs in the room with me, even if they were all about the size of New York City sewer rats. I opened the door just a bit, and standing on our porch is the sketchiest man that I think I've ever seen. I can still picture him perfectly. He was a really thin, taller man with dark hair and a sunken face, bags under his eyes, and his half-managed hair, sort of like he just gave it a quick brush and then figured it was good enough. Everything about him seemed just a little too thin, a little too shallow, and his clothes were all off too. They were nice, but fake nice, you know. Like a clean, newer-looking t-shirt and new jeans. But he had what looked like a suit jacket on. All his clothes were dark too, despite the fact that it was summer in Texas and the weather was definitely into the hundreds that day. He also had this plain, unlabeled bottle in his hand. It looked like the label had been covered up and taped over. I stared up at him in confusion because I definitely didn't know this man, and I asked what he wanted. He smiled at me in this way that was way too fake, like this exaggerated and forced grin, and he spoke in the same voice that retail workers do. "Oh, hey there, kiddo, I'm trying to sell this here carpet cleaner," and he shakes the bottle at me. "Mind if I come in and show you how good it works?" Alarms are going off in my head because he just seems so off. Looking back with an adult perspective, the fact that he didn't ask if my parents were home is unnerving, because he probably knew they weren't and that's why he was there in the first place. I should have told him to get off our property, that I would have to go get my mom, something except what I did say, but I didn't. Instead, I just shook my head and said, "No, we don't have carpet." "Well, it works on other things too." And he took a big step towards the door, and he shook the bottle at me. I start to freak out and think to close the door. But the thing is that our front door didn't even lock. It's a small town and a hard to access home. We never needed a lock, so it was basically useless. I'm sure there's something very wrong about to happen, and I'm terrified as I think about what to do in the few seconds that I think I have before it does happen, when all of a sudden I hear it. Punky had crept up from the hallway, lowered towards the ground with her teeth bared and snarling like she was feral. She had slobber dripping from her mouth and her ears were down and she was ready to pounce. The guy hears it too, and as I look towards Punky, she tries to lunge past me, and I just barely catch her with my leg as she tries her hardest to duck past me and attack this guy. He freaks out and runs off the porch without another word, booking it down the driveway as I let Punky out along with the rest of our dogs and they start chasing him. Our small dogs chase him down the driveway and stop about halfway, barking and jumping about. But Punky stops just on the porch and watches him with her ears perked, just staring in the distance until he disappears. I swear that I saw someone join up with him, running when he got onto the road. The second that he disappeared, Punky's entire body language changed when she went back to being the sweet dog that I knew. No barking or growling, just laying around, mouth and throat covered in slobber still. I realize my siblings are still down the hall and I run to check on them. And when I get to the bedroom, they were still sleeping soundly. But the bedroom window was wide open. The curtains were pushed all to one side and the items on the dresser in front of the window were all shoved around. Somebody had tried to climb through the window. No doubt in my mind about it. From what I can gather, the bedroom window was visible from the couch where Punky was sleeping. So I think someone was trying to climb through the window before Punky went after them, and it scared them off, and the man at the door was meant to distract me. They definitely didn't expect Punky, a bigger dog, because most of the time she was with my mom inside, while our small dogs were the ones that saw public eye more often. I don't know what they intended to do, but after my mom got home, she took all of us to my aunt's house, and on the way there, we saw the man walking up somebody else's driveway. Men in plural, because we watched a second one split off to wait by the road. I moved a lot growing up. By the time freshman year of high school came around, I had moved about 7 or so times and was about a year and a half into my most recent move. I had found a pretty close friend group of friends in middle school and we all went to high school together. I met him through one of those closer friends. They were in a band together, and even though he was almost 4 years older than us, we welcomed him into our group. Sam was easily twice my size, tall and heavy set, and originally kind of intimidating. Although I was never afraid of large men before him. Lesson learned. I had a kind of a bad home life, and I would spend as much time as I could at school. Sometimes hanging around the school campus until about 6 or 7 at night with this friend group. The three of us lived in the same direction, and we would walk the half-hour trip together until our paths split. One slightly colder evening, Sam offered to walk me home since the others had gone home already. I just thought that he was being a gentleman. He mentioned something from a previous move when he had lived in California. He didn't walk a friend home and something horrible had happened, so we left it at that, and I let him walk me home. We got a lot closer after that. We bonded over both living in California, and we traded numbers. He would message me late into the night about his depression, and I just wanted to help him. A few months later, he tried asking me out. It was this big romantic gesture. He had learned a Disney song on the ukulele and sang to me in the cafeteria. But I was already dating somebody at the time, and when I turned him down for it, he got angry. A freaky, quiet, twitchy kind of angry. I felt so bad. After that, I started seeing him everywhere. We were still friends and we would still hang out in groups, but I would pass him on the street walking somewhere, and a few minutes later I would see that he had changed directions and he had started to follow me. He would walk me to classes by following me in a passing period at a distance. I started to minimize the group time that we would spend together, and he would follow me more then. I had friends that meet me at each class and walk me to my next one because I felt unsafe because of him, and he knew where I lived at. And then he started to talk, not to me but to mutual friends, about that one girl in California who he tried to walk home. At first, he had just shared my name, some crazy coincidence. And then she had the same brown curly hair and blue eyes. And every time that he rambled on about her, she became more and more like me. And then he said what had happened. Over literal weeks, this fantasy had evolved. They were walking home and they were jumped by some guy with a knife. It was a robbery gone wrong on her birthday, January 24th, my birthday. And she had died horribly and he couldn't react in time. She had blood out in his arms. Sarah, who had brown curly hair, blue eyes. My name, my birthday, and sounds just like me, and bled out in his arms. Each retelling added more and more detail, and this guy with this sick fantasy about my death would follow me around, and he knew where I lived. My boyfriend at the time and I weren't in a healthy relationship, but I stayed as close to him as I could whenever I could, because if the worst happened, I knew for sure he could throw a punch. I never felt safe at school or in our little town walking home from school in the dark. One day at school, he had a breakdown, freaked out, and he ran out of the school in a panic. I was sent after him and found him curled up on the floor. I got closer. I knew about his anxiety and depression, and my safety aside, I wanted to make sure that he was okay. It was then that he told me this horrifying story that I had been hearing from mutual friends with added detail. We had been walking home from a concert in California and we passed a dark alley and a homeless man came out with a rusty knife and asked for anything valuable. I fumbled for my phone. I didn't have anything else on me, and he thought that I was calling the police. He stabbed me once, twice, and again, and Sam stood there terrified. He saw red and grabbed a broken glass bottle near my body, and he had attacked the homeless man. He killed him with his own knife. He told me that he had killed someone. It didn't matter how messed up he was anymore. I didn't care if it was a fantasy or real. I didn't care how it would affect his mental health anymore. I wanted to go to the police. I was scared for my life. My friends convinced me to go to the school counselor first. And that morning, we went in and told them everything. The stalking, the stories, how he had admitted to murder, and that was the reason they had moved from California. How I was afraid for my life and wanted to call the police. The counselor didn't take us seriously. She went to the principal, and the principal, not a mental health expert, called Sam in to talk about the accusations. The principal then informed me that he did not think that Sam had any kind of mental illness or that I was in any danger, and that was that. I lost faith in adults and gave up going to the police. I stayed with my friend, walking me in between classes, hiding behind my boyfriend, and looking behind me every step of my walk home that year. The counselors ended up gaslighting us to the point where this all feels like a fever dream now, and I would think it's made up if it weren't for my journal entries, recording the events and my growing panic, and the similar stories from my friend group.